Good morning! I have a very fun photo shoot today, which is why I am all dolled up for the camera right now. I am going to do a Dungeons & Dragons AU Amazing Digital Circus shoot. If that sounds familiar, it's because in November, I believe, the voice actor cast did a D&D one-shot live streamed and DM'd by Alex. And there was this beautiful character art that he commissioned by this artist that I fell in love with the moment I saw it. I reposted it to my Instagram story and said, I want to do a cosplay group of this someday. And within like 4 hours, I had an entire group set up. So today I'm going to be bringing that group to life, and what better time to start the intro to this cosplay build log than the morning of the photo shoot. I locked in real hard on this costume. Unfortunately, so much so that I forgot to film certain parts of it, so bear with me as I make do with what footage and photos I have to explain my process. And without further ado, I will show you the process and I will come back after the shoot is done with the outro. I did something that I don't normally do when I start planning cosplays, and that's worked from the bottom up. The first thing I did was took an old pair of boots that I did not wear anymore and transformed them into Pomni's boots. To do this, I had to basically deconstruct them and reconstruct them. I started by cutting off all of those straps on the outside. Those were part of the reason that I never wore them in the first place. I just didn't like the look of them, and they were pretty easy to remove. I just needed to cut them off and then X-Acto knife the areas that were a little bit stubborn. And once those were out of the way, I took a bottle of white fabric paint and gave it a makeover. The yellow, blue, and red parts around the shoes are scraps from the original Pomni cosplay that I just cut up to fit the size. All I did was stitch the blue or red parts onto the yellow felt, and then I glued it onto the shoe. I do not have a sharp enough needle to puncture this fake leather, so glue it was. I did fear that gluing them on in this way would make the shoes a little less flexible, but once I tried them on when they were done, they moved around just fine. I also added some felt onto the tips to make little toe covers. Hi, Lil. So I genuinely entered flow state while I was making the shirt for this, and I recorded none of the base. So while I'm cutting out the little yellow arm thingies, I'm gonna explain how I did all that. So the way I pattern things is I look at my own clothes and I try to find something similar that I could like copy paste the shape of, and I used a vest that is way too small on me and I extended the length so it would be the proper size. And then the sleeves, I used the same deconstructed sleeve that I used on Harper, but I made it a lot wider so I had more of a chance to gather it and make it puffy. It isn't as puffy as I would like it to be, but it still will create that nice shape. And now I have to go and do all of the details, which I am setting up right now. Currently, the shirt without all of that detailed stuff is giving pajamas. I did film myself in it to show the other members of this group, and it literally looks like I am about to go honk shoe. So take that as you will. Now I'm cutting out these little triangles to put onto the sleeves before I gather them. And then I'm gonna add cuffs and maybe the collar today. To attach these little felt triangles onto the sleeves, I did the exact same method that I did for the shoes, where I just did whatever stitch I felt was appropriate at the time. I'm still learning the names for these. I'm still relatively new. I'm pretty sure this one's a whip stitch, and I'm almost 100% certain the ones I do down the longer sides are running stitches, but correct me if I'm wrong. I'm still fairly new to this whole sewing thing. the cuffs are made out of white cotton. What I did was just kind of estimate the shape, and then I hemmed the sides and the bottom with hem tape. The other part was left raw because I was going to sew it onto the inside of the cuff of the sleeve after I gathered it. And that I did the same way you gather any old thing, where you take a single thread and just run it all the way through and pull it together. I don't know if sewing the cuff on the machine was the easier or harder way to do it, but I felt lazy and didn't want to do it by hand, so I just stitched that on and then folded it over. Then I added a button. I found these little pearlescent buttons at Michael's, and I thought they were so cute and just fit the vibe well. So all I did was hand stitch those on, and it also closed the cuff. I believe that the little part that sticks out at the bottom of the shirt is called a peplum, and to do that, I did my first ever semi-successful French seam. If you don't know what that is, it's where you sew a garment wrong sides together, trim the seam allowance, fold it over, and then sew right sides together again, and it completely hides all the raw edges. I wanted to do this because I thought it would look cleaner, and this fabric frayed so much when I was handling it in the parts that I didn't record, and I did not want to deal with it again. Honestly, the fact that I have not done this in any project before kind of bewilders me because it's so easy. This would have saved me so much stress if I had done it on multiple other things. So I guess I have joined the side of the French seam girlies. Just when you see the clip in a minute where it's finished and flipped out, it's so clean. I adore it. I am a little scared of making the collar, so I'm putting the shirt down for a little bit, and I'm going to be making the shorts instead today. I have already started. I got the round part of the pant legs sitting over there already sewn. I just have to get the front and the back. I'm using my regular Pomni ones as a pattern. As you can see, I've got them inside out so I can see the seam allowances. I could just go back and get the actual pattern I used, but I think I threw it away by accident because I can't find it. So we're doing it the hard way. So I was worried that I was gonna confuse the front and back of the pants because they look pretty similar and there's only like a slight difference in how much, and I was like, oh, I'm going to accidentally sew one or two of them together, so I'm gonna try to keep them together. And then I got too ahead of myself and sewed the right and left pant leg together of the back. So it's seam ripped now. So now I definitely won't have any trouble. Minor inconvenience. All I had to do was unpick it and then put it back together. Like the original Pomni pumpkin pants, this needed an elastic waistband because they were huge and puffy. I did this with scraps that were on the selvage edge of the jacquard I was using. Is that how you say it? Jacquard? And as I did the last time, I turned it into a big tube and then fed the elastic through it. And no, it has not gotten any easier, by the way. Alright, what are we gonna do about this cape? Because the shape of it is weird. It's not a cape that I can just circle skirt or oval skirt, because it kind of has a part that like comes over the shoulders and then drapes more in the back. And I'm not entirely sure how I want to do that. And I only have this much gradient to work with, so I'm gonna have to sketch a couple of things out before I draw or cut anything onto this fabric. So give me like 10 minutes. The shape that I came up with wasn't the most accurate or the most flowy, but it worked with what material I had. I cut the neckline, came down over the shoulders, then turned at about a 90-degree angle to create that part that would drape over them, went in, and then went back out and continued as normal. It looks weird like this, but altogether, I promise you, it works. Oh wait, this is actually a pretty decent silhouette. It goes to about where it is on her character art. These are a little shorter than I thought, but I can live with that. I think, depending on how I combine this layer with the flannel layer, that will help with some of the missing centimeters, but I think we've got a good start. Being satisfied with what I had come up with, I made the flannel layer and just took what I had cut out and went over by an inch or so to create the other layer. And then I sewed this part entirely off camera because it took a while. All I did was fold that extra inch as a seam allowance over top of the lining so I could hide all of those raw edges. I've got the trim on the cape, and I knew it was gonna take a while, but this whole side took an hour last night, and I'm gonna try to do the rest with the time I have today. It's going to take a while, so I'm gonna record like one pass through before I enter flow state and like lock in so hard that the rest of the world doesn't exist. The method to my madness for this trim was to do vertical stitches on the outside layer and horizontal stitches on the inside layer. I'm not sure why this worked the way that it did, but it made sense in my brain. The collar is very pointy and stands upright in the art, so I had to interface it. I've also never used iron-on interfacing before, but it's really easy. I should have learned this skill way sooner too. Sewed these bad boys wrong sides together and flipped it inside out so the interfacing was on the inside layer, and then I stitched it onto the collar of the cape. This also really didn't have any rhyme or reason to it. I'm just tacking it on in a way that made it stay. I really need to brush up on my technical terms is what I'm learning from this voiceover. It's kind of working. I guess I really did just have to trust the process. These don't come down as far as I thought they did, and they make kind of a weird shape on the shoulders, but like everything else makes up for it. I got a collar that actually is shaped right and kind of stands up. I got some pretty trim. It'll stay on my shoulders because I can turn this into a bow. So yeah, that's a win. Right after recording that clip, I realized I forgot the little tails that had bells on them, so I cut leftover flannel into that shape and hem taped it, pressed it nice and flat, and got ready to tack on the jingle bells. These were huge jingle bells that I found at Michael's. I honestly was hoping they would be a little smaller because I was worried they'd be too heavy, but I stitched these on like 10 billion times and they stayed put really well. And they make a great sound. You just gotta listen to it. Hold up. It was impossible to lose me on the shoot day because you could hear me everywhere I walked. Okay, so this shirt's driving me a little nuts. I use all of my Velcro that I have left to make it seal, and it's just a wee bit uneven. But I honestly don't care at this point. I just want it to be done, and it doesn't close all the way. So I have to do something that I've never done before, and that is make a buttonhole for an extra button to close the collar. The collar's cute. I like it. It doesn't go quite all the way around, but she has a little jingle bell here, so I can tack that on to hide that gap, but the button will also help. It's real easy. I just gotta put it like right above a little bit like between my collarbones, and that'll help it stay more. But like, it's just really annoying, you know?
Barely any of this got in frame, I'm sorry. I cut out a slit with my X-Acto knife and then darned it by hand so it wouldn't fray. Yeah, I really don't know why this all didn't get into the recording because I was very proud of actually making a buttonhole. Then I made sure that the button could go through, attached that, and also attached the jingle bell. I think I'm going to get a hook and eye to make this stronger because here the jingle bell was especially heavy. Still was just as satisfying to jingle around though. Last but not least was the process of making the hat. This was the part that I was most worried about. I had a sun hat that I wanted to cover up because I never wore it and it was too big for my head, and I felt that adding extra fabric and the wig would make it actually stay on me. So I patterned it out. I traced the brim and the crown, I guess it's called, the part that sits on your head, and cut that out of the flannel because that is the primary color, and I was going to use those to cover the top of the hat. The bottom was an entirely different story. They were the same measurements, of course, but I didn't have enough of the pink fabric that I was going to use for the bottom. I only had enough to make one half, but then looking back at the character art, I saw that the folded up part of the hat kind of turned blue again. So what I did was I kept that half circle of the pink, and then I took some extra scraps from the gradient cotton that I had to create another gradient, and then I sewed those together to glue onto the bottom half. I think it turned out pretty well. Once all of those pieces were cut out and my hat was prepped, I started by lining them up and making sure that I had measured it correctly. And thank goodness, because I wasn't cutting all of that out again, I did. Once again, this is held together by hot glue and a prayer. That is my go-to method for things that I'm not entirely sure how to do. I didn't think I would be a hat maker when I started cosplay, okay? Once the entire thing was covered, it was looking pretty good. The circle on the top was probably the hardest part because it didn't lay flat, but I like the bunched up effect that it gave, especially when I put that yellow ribbon around it and it hid all of those raw edges. It just made it look so cute. The last thing I did was take a dyed yellow feather, stick it into the ribbon, and tacked up the part of the brim that was folded up. And then I was finally done the cosplay. Let me show you a little clip of what the hat looks like with the wig, and then we will move on to the final reveal.
So much for outro right after I get back from the shoot. I literally came home last night and crashed, and now I also have a little bit of an allergy thing going on, so I'm gonna sound a little dead, so bear with me. That went really well. I'm very proud of how everything came together. In regards to my costume, I think it looked cohesive, it worked, I could move in it fine, I could pose in it fine. I loved that I didn't mute those jingle bells because it just was really satisfying to hear them jingle every time I walked. It is not my best work. I will definitely admit that. The insides of the blouse and the shorts are very unfinished. The blouse doesn't come all the way down on
my torso and a tiny bit of my belly button shows. It's not the worst thing in the world, but I did have to wear an undershirt. There's now a safety pin in the hat because the folded part, the stitch broke and the feather fell off, so I've got to fix that before I wear it again. But like, everything else survived being in the outdoors. A couple of leaves stuck here and there, but like nothing else actually like came apart, which I'm very, very thankful about. And the photos should be back by June, so I'm very excited to see how those turned out. I really didn't take any footage at the shoot itself. I was focused on getting the photos done and having fun with my friends. So if you want to see those photos, you can follow me on the Instagram and be notified when they are ready. And if you like this video, I encourage you to like, subscribe, comment, hit all of the buttons, and I will see you in another one. Goodbye.